Amen.
That's what it sounded like in front of Edmonton's provincial legislature Sunday. The Canadian Jewish hockey star Zach Hyman, who now plays for the Edmonton Oilers, was strapped into the cab of an orange crane with a cherry picker lift, and they hoisted him and local rabbi Ari Dreylach to the top of the giant menorah. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney had already lit the shamash, and Hyman placed it where it needed to go and then lit the butane and turned on the first candle. And then he recited the blessings, and the rabbi said it was, quote, like a good Jewish boy. It was the 30th year Edmonton's community has done a public Hanukkah ceremony. This year, though, the athletes' participation capped off an afternoon that included a dreidel parachute and a car menorah parade through the streets of the city. 40 cars with giant menorahs strapped to them. The menorahs were built by teens involved in the Chabad chapter in Edmonton. And this all drew a lot of attention to the Jewish Festival of Lights, which is what you're supposed to do to fulfill the ritual Pirsumei Nisa, which is to publicize the light of the Hanukkah menorah for 8 days.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Premier, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming to the first PEI public Hanukkah menorah lighting and celebration of the 120-year presence of a Jewish community on PEI. We are fortunate.
Meanwhile, in PEI, Canada's smallest province, about 60 people from the Jewish community stood on the lawn of the Legislative Assembly building in Charlottetown for a less flashy but no less important milestone. It was the first time in the island's 120-year history of Jewish settlement that a Hanukkah menorah has been lit at the provincial government building, a building where the Fathers of Confederation first met to found Canada.
Right across from the provincial legislature in 1898, there was a Jewish store, and it was owned by Philip Goodstein. And Philip ran the store called New York Cheap Goods. And so for me, it was just, imagine Philip standing in front of his store and seeing such an event.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Tuesday, November the 30th, 2021. Welcome to the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia. PEI has no rabbi and no synagogue and no Jewish cemetery, but the community is used to managing without. This milestone Hanukkah project has been a year in the making. They bought a 3-meter-high metal frame, and they worked out all the electrical issues and obtained permission from the government. And because of COVID, the ceremony couldn't happen last year. This Sunday, though, PEI's Premier, Dennis King, spoke, as did other politicians, and the head of the Jewish community, Leo Mednick, and Joseph Glass, a local professor and historian, and the international best-selling spirituality author Martin Root, who told reporters it was, in a sense, a coming-out party of Jews in Prince Edward Island. Coming up, we'll meet one of the organizers of the event, Dr. Joseph Glass, but first, here's what's making news elsewhere in Canada right now.
I'm Jay Mandelker in Thornhill, Ontario, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like.
Strong reactions are still coming in over the University of Toronto Scarborough's student union, which adopted motions that Jewish groups say will prevent kosher food from being permitted on campus and could force Jewish students to prove they are not supporters of Israel or Zionism. These motions passed at the Student Council's recent meeting. The first expanded support for the BDS, or Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement against Israel, and the second deals with academic freedom on campus. It'll outlaw events that are organized or sponsored by campus and community groups that support Israel or Zionism. Although Holocaust and Jewish history events are okay, though. The head of U of T, Merrick Gertler, calls these rules unacceptable and, quote, inconsistent with the University of Toronto's core values of freedom of speech and inclusion. Joseph Glass is a retired professor, and he's writing the history of the Jewish community of Prince Edward Island. He'll have to add a new chapter after this. He joins me now from his home in Pownell, PEI.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah.
And same to you. Congratulations on the lighting ceremony in Charlottetown. Why don't you take a step back a little bit and explain a little bit how that came to be?
Well, it actually started through a Facebook post. One of our members was out in Charlottetown around Christmas time last year and put in a post saying, why can't the Jewish community also have something in the city that we can enjoy and celebrate the Jewish traditions at the same time? It was quite a big celebration.
So let's talk a bit about, you're a historian and you've been studying the history of Jewish life in PEI, written about it, been quoted about it, published articles about it. You've got a book as well.
Well, that's not ready yet.
Coming out, hopefully, God willing.
It'll take around a couple of years to get it all done.
What would the Fathers of Confederation have thought, do you think, seeing the menorah outside the building where Canada was founded? Pretty amazing.
I think they would be confused, but at the same time impressed. The premier, the speaker, MLAs, a large group of our community, the Jewish community and the non-Jewish community, all coming out to celebrate. I think it was unimaginable back in 1898 that such an event would happen. The Fathers of Confederation, when they came here to the island, there weren't many Jews. I think there may have been one Jew at the time, but I'm not 100% certain if he was still there.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about current day. PEI is not immune to incidents of anti-Israel hatred and anti-Semitism, and you've had a couple of swastika incidents. But in general, how are Jews accepted?
So there is that sort of deep-rooted anti-Semitism that has existed, quite often connected to the Catholic Church, and ideas were put forward, but that's going back over 100 years ago. There have been a few incidents that I've come across historically. There was, I think it was Jaime Kashetsky from St. John, Newfoundland, who was working here as a peddler in the 1930s. And when someone called him a Jew and did it in a derogatory way, he actually fought with him. But Jaime Kashetsky may have been small, but he was a well-known boxer in St. John when he was growing up. So there are those little incidents here and there, but all in all, the large community in PEI has been welcoming. They've been, in the present, very supportive. A few years ago, I think it was 2017, there was the vigil that was held here for the shooting in
2018, correct, the Tree of Life. You had a lot of non-Jewish people come out for that too, right?
Yes, we actually had around 300 people coming out on short notice. And it was wonderful to see that support from the general community and, of course, the Jewish community. And so the picture here is that there are a few people that may have anti-Semitic feelings. There may be a few people that show anti-Semitic expressions, like raising a flag with a swastika on it. But that is really not the norm.
So happy Hanukkah to all the people in PEI who are, celebrating this year in a special way.
If I could add just one thing, is that we have a second lighting that's going on. The town of Stratford actually ordered a hanukkiah to be made locally by a metal worker in Eastern PEI, and they'll be lighting it for the 8 days. And on Tuesday, the 30th, we'll be joining them in celebrating the lighting of that hanukkiah. So here again, it's sort of like the story of the Jew on a desert island. Not one synagogue, but two synagogues. So here we have two hanukkiahs. And the hope is that over the years, we'll be able to share Hanukkah across the island and either move the hanukkiahs around or get more hanukkiahs, so that way we can participate in this time of the year, enjoying the different festivals of light, if it's Diwali that just passed, if it's our Hanukkah, if it's Christmas with all the Christmas lights. And so it's an attempt to say that we're part of the island. We want you to see that we're here, and we're happy to be here. And hopefully we'll have hanukkiahs from Surrey all the way to Tignish being lit each year, although there's not many Jews in Tignish today. So
probably not. And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, sponsored by Metropia. Integrity, community, quality, and customer care. Today's listener shout-out goes to Harriet Nussbaum in Montreal. We interviewed her and her 114-year-old mother, Cecile, earlier this year. And we'll close the episode with some more from PEI's Hanukkah ceremony. The whole thing is on YouTube, and you can watch it. The link is in our show notes. Here are Amalia and Eli, two local Jewish children leading the blessings, and some songs.
Hanukkah,